All right. Welcome everybody to our informational webinar about Senate Bill 752. I want to thank you all so much for joining us today. We've got some really great speakers and a nice lineup to educate about this very important bill that passed this last session and went into effect July 1st. So with no further ado, I'm going to kick it off to a video that you can all watch to get us started.
We begin this hour with one of the biggest hip hop artists in the game, Meek Mill. A law that he and his organization, the Reform Alliance, fought for took effect in Florida last month. It allows people to shorten their probation term by getting credits by going to school or working at least 30 hours a week. The law also allows people to check in remotely with their probation officers.
So there's a real problem with our probation system, how big it is, how bureaucratic it is. And what we saw were real solutions that were put on the table, conversations that happened across the board with unlikely allies everywhere in the state. And ultimately that momentum led to 100% support on one side, 100% support on the other side, and the signature by the governor.
It allows these probationers to report in with their probation officer virtually via Zoom or whatever other platform the Department of Corrections has.
Being a good family member, developing your social network, getting a job, going to school, all those kind of things become much harder rather than easier when you don't have remote reporting.
This financially takes the stress that you don't have to take a day off work, especially if you have to travel to get to a probation office. It allows for, consistency in their employment. It's great for business owners. It's great for the employers.
So the workforce achievement credits basically create a system in which if you meet a certain criteria in terms of how much work you're doing, you can get 30 days off of your probation. And trust me, as somebody who's been on probation, every single hour, every single day matters.
You need a job anyways to survive, right? So if I can, work, get paid from work and then get credit to get our probation early, guess what? I'm working. I might get 2 jobs. For every education course that you complete, that's 60 days off your probation.
Whether it be college courses or vocational, all of those things will give them some credit toward their probation serve. The studies show, again, that people with stable employment and these forms of education are less likely to get in trouble again. In addition to the House members and the senators working collaboratively to pass these bills, it also requires members of the community and other stakeholders and other interested groups to really work and push.
With unlikely allies coming together and having conversations, and lo and behold, you see policy come out of it that really will impact people's lives in a positive way.
Reward people for doing the right thing is an incentive for them to do more right.
I can't help but have a positive impact.
Right now, our probation system has a lot of challenges, and this is a great step to ultimately fix that system so that people can truly re-enter the community and prosper. And when people prosper, when they re-enter the community, everybody benefits.
Awesome. And without further ado, I'm going to introduce our first speaker, the co-sponsor of Senate Bill 752, also Senate Chairman of Criminal Justice Committee and a leader in criminal justice reform, Senator Jason Pizzo. Take it away.
Hi, I don't know how much time I'm supposed to fill. Happy to be here and listen. And it's these criminal justice reform victories are few and far between. So I was just kind of wanted to sit back and listen. But yeah, it's one of those wonderful moments of nonpartisan. I won't even say bipartisan. It's just the right thing to do. We've had a few little sort of appetizers or teases on these, sealing and expunction as well. But this is something that's sort of axiomatic to me. I am actually a former prosecutor in Miami-Dade. I principally handled the shootings and homicides of children. And what was not sort of driving is, and Tammy probably knows this as well as anybody, we allow for private entities like the advocate program and court options to actually supervise on DUIs, which are misdemeanors. And sometimes when they start out as felonies and they're broken down as well. This is kind of a no-brainer. The sort of disconnect is everything in criminal justice space because not many people are familiar with it. The very first meeting I held as chair of criminal justice 2 years ago was an introductory presentation because we had members who don't know the difference between a misdemeanor and a felony, who keep saying jail interchangeably when they mean prison. And half of the committee of the new members still thought we had parole, even though that was done away with in 1983. And then the sort of general consensus coming out of the first meeting, individually or as a group, was really centered on what can we do to incentivize people that are either incarcerated or on probation to earn something. And Senator Perry's line was, whenever we have two people, let's say, that are incarcerated, one's sitting on the bed doing nothing, the other one is busting their butt, getting every type of vocational certification, GED, anything they possibly can, and it still, the net effect is still the same, is just untenable and really doesn't serve the public well. The other narrative has been not about punishment. The principal purpose of the criminal justice system in Florida by statute is codified to say it is principally about punishment. And I think the narrative, and I actually filed a bill that it be changed to public safety. If it's public safety, you can get people to buy in who are neither victim nor defendant or anyone related to it. I'll even give you $1 when I renew my driver's license if it's going for public safety. The probation officers and operation is woefully underfunded. That whole section of the state, the budget, the line item, and not to be flippant or say anything partisan, but it took 36 months for me to get the governor to visit a prison for the first time. He went to McCullough. Nikki Fried only visited one 2 weeks ago because it was coming up on election time. And pursuant to 944.23, cabinet officers and all legislators can visit 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Also, what my colleagues didn't know is 30% of the 80,000 get out every year. And we do little, if anything. Senator Brandis, my roommate and my buddy on the other side of the aisle, literally my roommate in Tallahassee, used to say, we need to do more than $50 in a bus pass. And that's the truth. In fairness to probation officers, we're not handing off, I should say, men and women who are equipped, ready, or prepared to be assimilated so easily and so swimmingly, hitting the ground running back into society. So it's as intense as any type of supervision situation for them as well. This one allows for a lot of incongruency that occurs, even for people that are on probation that do something really stupid on spring break and will go back somewhere else, especially for remote reporting. And then there's other things that we're also working on. The stigma of having a huge ankle monitor, ends up only in Miami or only in Dade on Instagram. It gets 30,000 likes, but there are now watches that look the same. And also, again, it goes into fairness with remote reporting and being treated like an adult and not somebody that probation doesn't want to catch you in a gotcha moment. They're not looking to send you back. They wish they had fewer case files, but they don't. And it took a long time, I think, for it to resonate how many people are in the system, so to speak. And then from there, once you have their attention, to explain to them that a lot of the probation officers are driving cars with 287,000 miles on them. I mean, just to show how sort of woefully, underfunded we are in this space. Nothing is more important to me than the safety of my identical twin 16-year-old boys who now drive, which is scary. So when you come from that position of, we all wish everybody well, everybody would like to see, or should innately like to see rehabilitation and re-assimilation to society and being productive. We just found out today, the latest reporting, there's 11.2 million jobs available in the United States. But it's also taken a lot of behind the scenes. Senator Brandis and I have met with Florida Retail Federation, Florida Trucking. Guys, you can hire these people. It's okay. They're not, going to drive off. This isn't Goodfellas. Okay. So it's a work in progress. And for too long, I think monolithically, everybody was just sort of grouped into one category. Now, I am not soft on crime. I want to be very clear. Okay. If you're molesting children, if you're doing patterns of fraud, I have zero sympathy for you. I want to be clear, because I have to tell that to people. They just assume that since I'm a Democrat, I'm no. When you prey on children, no. I am probably a lot more law and order than a lot of my Republican colleagues, because I understand the space and the nuance. Okay. I also know that there are 15-year-olds who have shot somebody and I would have done the same thing. I know that sounds weird, but it's a pattern of fraud, a pattern of predatory behavior. ill will, nefarious kind of malice that's different. But I have to tell you that there's that most of my colleagues, I think for a long time, it's getting much better in an accelerated fashion, have grouped everybody together, child molesters and the guy who has 3, DWLSs, which we don't do anymore, but has 3 suspended, 322.34 violations of driving while license suspended, and is sitting in the same cell. Just so trying to bifurcate what's predatory, what's not, and all that stuff. I'm going to shut up now, but it's a great bill. It makes sense. And that's why I swiftly put it on the agenda, and it passed unanimously in my committee 9-0 first time.
Thank you so much, Senator Pizzo, for your leadership on the bill with us to add on and get these credits and remote reporting passed, and your leadership in this space. I know you're a busy guy, and I hope you can stick around if there are questions for you later, but totally understand if you cannot.
I'm yours for the hour.
Oh, bless you. Oh, that's so great. Okay, well, you're a trooper. Thank you so much. Well, from here, I'm going to kick it over to Tammy Marcus. Tammy is the Florida Police Benevolent Association Probation Officer, chapter president, and we have been working very closely with her in the PBA this entire time. So Tammy, now's your time.
Yes, Katie, thank you again. I think we met probably for the first time about a year ago that you first approached PBA to support this piece of legislation. And I remember Matt Puckett saying, I'm going to defer to Tammy because she's the one that knows probation. Having been a probation officer for 31 plus years now, I guess I do know a little bit about it. So like Senator Pizzo was stating, probation officers, we essentially live the reentry and the criminal justice reform and reentry business. We're in the second chance business. We have been for hundreds of years since the beginning of time when John Augustus in Boston, took over, I think he was a drunkard or something. And and when you first pitched this idea to us, I remember it was a huge piece of legislation. And I remember even, when Senator Pizzo said about predators, that initial report, if you remember, I was like, no, we can't do that, include sex offenders, predators on some things were a hard no. But we went back to the drawing board and we worked together after many meetings and hours. Finally, came up with a collaboration of what we could easily do, because it is kind of a daunting task for probation officers. We are, just like everyone else in the world, understaffed, and with our antiquated database, some things were going to be difficult for us. So from that ginormous thing that you initially pitched to us and what we crafted at the end that was unanimously voted upon, I think it was a good piece of legislation that, I'm glad that you guys approached us to help craft that, because instead of it going, you hadn't, and we would have been drawing lines in the sand and having issues in the committee meeting. So essentially, I think that we've been doing some of these things for many years, the remote reporting, the alternative sanctions. You had a lot of good ideas, and we are already doing these things. And I don't think a lot of people know that we are doing, and we have been for years doing some form of remote reporting, evidence-based practices. We do, it used to be called independent reporting status. Now it's called interactive offender tracking system, where it's essentially a computer caseload management for those folks that do qualify to go in this program. And like Senator Pizzo was saying, it's for the least minimum classified offenders. We're not putting sex offenders or sex predators in that non-reporting status. So I agree with Senator Pizzo. It's the right thing to do. It's going to benefit, incentivize our people under supervision to, better themselves, get, better job, become a productive citizen. And that's all we're asking to. I mean, pretty much as a probation officer, I've always, said, my motto is do what you got to do so you can do what you want to do. So if some of doing what you got to do is maybe to get some kind of certification so you can lessen your sentence and get a better job, then, that's great. Like I said, that's what we are in the business of doing. Contrary to popular belief, we're not out to, send people back to prison. And FYI, we still do, it's not called parole anymore, but it's called conditional release, and it's essentially like parole. We do supervise those folks. So those folks coming from prison, and we have a lot of other programs, essentially to help navigate those people under our supervision to successfully complete. We have job fairs, we have a lot of reentry programs, we refer them to whatever services they need. And like I said, basically do what we can to navigate them to successfully complete their supervision. Because honestly, we'd much rather sign off on a successful completion letter than to sit down and have to write out a long, drawn out violation report, affidavit, and warrant, and wait till it gets disposed of. Like I said, that's not what we want to do. So again, this was from the huge jagged pill that initially was trying to be, swallowed. We condensed it down to a nice soft gel capsule. So that's the best way I can describe it. I think it's a win-win for everyone.
Awesome. Tammy, thank you so much for you and for the Police Benevolent Association's partnership and making this the best for all parties and something workable. And thank you for your service out there doing the job more than 20 years, and your service to PBA too. I know they love you over there, and we loved working with you. So thank you. And I'm going to kick it over to Emily Mooney from here, the Senior Policy Manager of Reform Alliance, who's going to dig a little deeper into the bill itself.
Awesome. So I think we have some slides. If Tralisha, if you could add those. Perfect. Okay. Well, to scope out a little bit, why is Reform even doing work in Florida? Besides, it being a lovely, beautiful sunshine state and all of us finding whatever excuse we can to visit Tammy's and her Pizzo and Katie. Florida had the 5th largest probation population in the country, with 1 in every 98 adults in Florida on probation at the end of 2020. That's approximately 180,000 people. So when you compare Florida's population, it's just completely outsized to the number of people that you would expect to see on probation, and points to a need to understand why is that happening, what's occurring there. And if you look just at the state probation system, approximately 94,000 people are on state felony probation, with 5,000 individuals also on state misdemeanor probation. So that means they're not serving probation at the local county level. According to the Florida Department of Corrections, the median probation, felony probation sentence is 3 years, but the average sentence is 4 years. So that means for the FTC has those 3 to 4 years to really help support someone on their pathway to rehabilitation. And if they're struggling and not doing well, to try to correct that behavior. But if that doesn't happen, then that person can be sent back to prison and have their supervision revoked, or maybe be incarcerated on a new offense. And indeed, within the first 3 years of being placed on community supervision, we found many people in Florida were being convicted of a new crime, and nearly 40% of people will see their supervision revoked. So and this is, to Tammy and Senator Pizzo's point, this is shame on probation officers. This is talking about a system. What can we do as a system to make sure people in prison are better equipped to reenter society? And then when they're on supervision, are better equipped and motivated to remain in society as a productive citizen. And so that's really the focus of this bill is, to right size the probation population, to increase public safety by increasing that success rate of people on supervision, so they feel they have the tools and resources they need to succeed. But also probation officers have the tool and resources that they need to help motivate individuals to really pursue that life change. And so the first, taking really from a platform that's been policy that's been used in over 18 states, including conservative states like Mississippi, South Carolina, Louisiana, Missouri, and Texas, among others, we started and drafted this bill focused on incentives, which is really earned time credit incentives that would allow people to reduce and shorten their term of supervision, specifically probation or community control, if they completed certain qualifying activities, which in this case is education credits. You could get 60 days off your sentence if you complete a vocational certificate, which can take months of work and is linked to increased rates of employment, or if you complete an academic degree, whether that's a bachelor's or associate's degree, or high school equivalency testing or your GED. And when you look at the number of people exiting prison, you look at their educational attainment, you see that's one of the big disparities between them and the general population is a lot of people who don't have that GED. They definitely don't have a college degree, and they very, very rarely have anything above that, which really limits their ability to find quality, meaningful employment, which is what is linked to reduced recidivism long-term. And so those education credits are not only rewarding positive behavior and giving probation officers another tool under their belt to do so, they're also helping someone, incentivizing someone in an often difficult reentry period to take that extra step, to finish that degree, to finish that GED, which will in turn help them find a job and become a productive member of Florida. And so the second part is workforce credits. Again, we know that employment and maintaining a job, sticking with a job can be very difficult, particularly for people that have been in and out of prison, maybe in and out of probation, and don't have a long employment history, don't have, the internships and kind of mentorship and training that a lot of us are fortunate to have in our careers. And so these workforce achievement credits, where if you stick with that job and you're working a full-time job for at least an average of 30 hours a week, you can earn 30 days off your sentence. That's, for people with long terms of supervision, that's still a meaningful reduction, a meaningful incentive. But it's also, it's a drip in the pot. It's not, it's not going to overwhelmingly shorten someone's sentence who isn't doing well. You have to be doing well and pursuing rehabilitation to really benefit from both of these incentives. And so that's the goal, is we want people who are pursuing education, pursuing work, to be rewarded, to have that feedback loop in their head rewarded. We know that helping people form a positive self-identification in the research literature is connected to reduced recidivism. And so we want people to really establish new identities, establish a new pathway and a new vision for their life, and education and continuous employment are critical for that. So that's the first part of the bill, is these earned credits. Again, they reduce your sentence 60 days for education credits, 30 days for workforce achievement credits if you're being a compliant person under supervision, under probation or community control. And I should note, for people who are not aware what community control is, it's essentially a form of house arrest supervision. So it's very intensive. People, with few exceptions, can't really leave their house, might be allowed to leave their house for a job. And so that success rate, if you have a roughly 60% success rate for normal probation and supervision, the success rate for people on community control is 28%. 28%. So 7 out of 10 times they don't make it. They're sent back to prison or they commit a new crime, they don't make it. And so that is, an abysmal success rate. And the department has done a really great job of looking for new incentives as part of their behavioral incentives regime to motivate those people and help them change their behavior and help them succeed. And so this is just another incentive to really fix and address those low success rates, while also, looking at probation officers who have large caseloads and need another tool in their tool belt to help make those meaningful, by making sure that people who are on the right track towards reentry, rehabilitation, and employment, they are contributing to society, they are forming new identities, that we're rewarding them and, allowing them to get off supervision a little bit earlier than they would otherwise, since they no longer present a public safety risk and are doing exactly what we want them to do. So next slide. And the second part of the bill is about remote reporting. It's just a very simple provision. It really just authorizes the use of remote reporting, both by the Florida Department of Corrections, which Tammy notes has been doing this for quite a bit of time, and for local misdemeanor probation agencies who have their own systems of probation. And what it says, if a county or the FTC elects to use remote reporting, they must have a publicly available policy. And this is really just to educate people on probation, people in the community, about what is available. So remote reporting and many has been used in some cases throughout the nation, for decades, whether that is used to be referred to as like administrative probation, paper reporting, or telephone reporting is quite popular. But it really came into its own during the pandemic, because people, were understanding the health and safety risk of meeting with lots of different individuals throughout a week. It wasn't safe for probation officers, wasn't safe for people on probation, who also often live in multi-generational households, increased health risks there. And so so counties switched, or departments switched to increasing use of remote reporting, whether that be by Zoom, which many of us use throughout the pandemic for work, or telephone or apps that are specifically meant for that purpose for people under supervision. And what we found is that that increased flexibility can dramatically reduce barriers to employment. We've heard tons of stories at Reform of people who have to do a check-in, in the middle of the day, drive across town to their probation office for an in-person check-in. And that means that, they might know that at the last minute, it might interrupt their work schedule. If they work those normal shift hours, we hear from employers that it can be really difficult to schedule around probationers' check-in schedules and that, or people under supervision check-in schedules. And that actually makes their job as an employer harder and makes it, more difficult for them to be a second chance employer. And that's not what we want. Probation, check-in should not be a barrier to employment, which is one of the more holistic goals of supervision. And it, as Senator Pizzo mentioned, we have probation officers with high mileage on their cars. Gas is expensive. We are at inflation is an all-time high. And so we also hear stories of, supervision officers spending hours and hours in their car, able to switch to remote reporting for some of their cases and finding, oh my goodness, I can have really high quality connections with people quickly and actually spend more meaningful time with multiple people on my caseload, which is what which is what important, those meaningful interactions. And in other cases, the cost, of just reporting in person can be really impactful for individuals. A lot of people on probation are living on the poverty line. Few people have employment right when they exit prison, and so or in place on probation, so they need to find that employment quickly. They already have to pay fines, fees, sometimes restitution as part of their caseload. And so that decision, if they have a higher reporting requirement, could save them that $100 that they can use for groceries, they can use for their kids' school supplies. And we do hear those stories about the value of remote reporting. And so as Tammy mentioned, the Florida Department of Corrections has actually scaled up their use of remote reporting through that IOTS software. It's almost like telephone reporting with biometrics to, ensure the person who's on the other line is the person that's supposed to be there. And they've had tremendous success with it. So far, they've seen higher success rates, which means people are more likely to complete their probation term without a new crime throughout or a serious violation. From people that were placed on the remote reporting caseload, and they are primarily low-risk individuals, and that they started the program as an incentive for those low-risk individuals. If you do well, you can be placed on this caseload. That now they've actually expanded it as a starting point for many of those low-risk individuals, and have seen that work really well with approximately over 10,000 people on that remote reporting caseload. We also have probation agencies like in Miami-Dade that have used remote reporting as well as another tool, to increase that flexibility for people under supervision, their officers, remove barriers to compliance, and really increase public safety by making sure people can go to work and take care of their medical necessities, take care of their children, and that probation is a support for them to become a productive citizen rather than at times a barrier. So that those, we would love to see more localities embrace remote reporting. We would love for the FTC to expand their use of remote reporting. And so Reform is certainly, will be keeping an eye on that. But we really are fortunate to have worked on this bill to, establish these earned credits, which have been tremendously successful in red states throughout the nation. And to, really permanently create that infrastructure for remote reporting to say, this is okay to use, this is good to use, this can be a benefit to probation offices and people under supervision, and to work in a, as Senator Pizzo said, really a nonpartisan manner on this bill, and with Tammy and the PBA to really make sure that this language worked, for people under supervision and probation officers, the people actually who have to administer and the credits and do that, hard implementation work up front. So we are incredibly grateful to work with everyone here in a fabulous coalition, I should say, that gave us feedback throughout the way as well. And really, really fortunate to have had this bill passed. And we hope this is just a notion of what's to come. So thank you, Katie. Oh, actually, can you do the next slide real quick? Yeah, so for anyone who's like, I want to be involved with Reform, how do I get involved? This is just a text Reform number. You text anytime. Our fabulous memberships team, who Tricia is doing these lovely slides, is a part of. We'll get in touch with you. We always want to hear people's stories. We want to hear people's ideas. Our goal is to really produce evidence-based reforms grounded in public safety and grounded in lived experiences and lived issues. So feel free to text reform anytime, become a member, but also feel free to reach out to us at the end of the presentation. Okay, thanks, Katie.
Thank you, Emily. And it goes without saying, it's been awesome to work with you here in Florida. And thank you for the amazing work that you've done on this legislation and legislation in other states. Reform's really fortunate to have you. And thanks for joining today too. So with that, next I'm going to introduce Tony Conyers. For those of you that caught the video, he spoke a little about his time on probation and what the credits mean while serving probation. So go ahead, Tony. Thanks for joining.
How you guys doing? I'm Tony Conyers, and I'm spending 20 years on probation, early termination in 10. So for me, like, this bill right here is everything. It's all the incentive that someone like me or me, myself, is all that I need, because, you know, I need a full-time job. You know what I'm saying? So what this does is this gives me an incentive to work harder. You know what I'm saying? Educational credits. When I was in prison, I spent 23 years in prison. So when I was in there, I had life without the possibility of parole. So the vocational side of the prison stuff I didn't get because I felt like I had too much time, you know what I'm saying, to be afforded the opportunity to actually, you know, be given a seat to obtain those vocational classes. And so now that I'm out and I'm on probation and I can, you know, get time off for going to school and achieving something, man, for me, that's, you know, hey, man, I love it. You know, so I've already contacted my probation officer down here, and I've shared the information with her, and she's doing the research on her side. And now she's informing her office, because her office was behind about the Senate bill. So now she's informing her office, you know, of, you know, the changes in it, and now she can address it to her clients. So like, you know, like me, I'm just like I said, man, I love everything that Reform Alliance is doing when it comes to, you know, the probationary aspect down here in Florida. And I am on the train 100%, because like I'm out here and I don't want to be in a position to where I got to fail because I'm not afforded a certain opportunity or a certain resource. You know what I'm saying? And, you know, I'm out here and I'm doing everything that I can do to make it easier on my end, you know what I'm saying? So for the probationary aspect, you know, for them being able to meet me halfway, you know what I'm saying, to make it that much easier, you know what I'm saying, that, hey, man, you know, you can get a couple of days off if you do this, or you can get a couple of days off if you do that. Man, that's like, I can ask for more, you know what I'm saying? And that actually gives me hope that, hey, now you don't have to do all them 20 years on probation. You don't have to, you know, do the whole 10, you know what I'm saying? And you can come out on the other side with, you know, achievements, you know? So, man, for me, that's what it is, man. I'm here to build.
Awesome. Thank you, Tony. And thank you for reaching out to your probation officer about these credits. That's why it's so important to have these webinars and this open dialogue so that we can all inform each other, because these credits do no good if people don't know that they can get them. And that's from every vantage point. So thank you so much. And thank you for sharing your story on the video and here today and joining us. And with that, I'm going to kick it over to Alex on the Reform Alliance team for some questions that some in the audience may have for our panelists here today. And take it away, Alex.
Hey guys, thank you all, the presenters. If Senator Pizzo, if you have a question, feel free to ask, but others, please also feel free to just chime in I think there's a little feature down at the bottom of the Zoom here. Let's see. One question we have, are any of the credits retroactive?
Great question. So the credits are not retroactive. However, if you began an educational activity, let's say you started your associate's degree, you've been taking classes in the spring before July 2022, which is the first effective date, and you finish that associate's degree, let's say next spring, because it takes a year or 2 years, then you would, you know, that those first couple of months would not be, you know, you couldn't have to start the associate's degree after July 1st. So I think with the educational credits, what matters most is that end date. When did you complete the educational activity? So in that case, you would still be awarded those 60 days off. For the employment credits, the department's using that July 1st date to start that 6-month period to see if someone is employed before they can be awarded the workforce credit. So I think for people that are on supervision before July 1st, make sure that you bring in that, the department will release information and, more established policies as they finalize their current processes, but make sure you bring in those pay stubs that have, the hours, make sure you bring in the verification letters. And that will help you build that towards those total hours, which is the department said they're going to calculate it based on that average. So, over 6 months, what does an average of 30 hours look like? So bring in those letters to calculate those total hours over those 6 months, and then you should be able to get your credits in, early January after the 6-month period is over. But great question.
Thank you, Emily. Next question, probably for Tammy. Do you have any anecdotes about how remote reporting has been used in the field and sort of the value it offers for probation officers and for clients?
Well, for the clients, I think it was Tony that said, you're working. Sometimes people that are working a job or 2 jobs, it's hard to come in here. Some have to report once a month, some have to report weekly. So it helps them if they've got a, Monday through Friday, 8 to 5 job. That's our hours. It's kind of hard to get in and hard to take off. And some jobs aren't as lenient. So it does kind of help them out. And especially if they qualify for that, or maybe if they don't, to work towards it to be able to get to that. For probation officers, it can lessen the caseload of those that they have to spend more time on and see, because there's some folks under supervision that you don't really need to spend that much time with. So they can spend time with others that are on more of a maximum supervision or something like that, that don't qualify to be remote reporting. So it kind of lessens their what we call active reporting case numbers. So, and that's why we essentially that IOTS, that interactive offender tracking system, I believe we have like about 12,000 folks in that. So again, that lessens some of the folks on supervision that our officers have to see. There's only about 2,000 of us statewide supervising almost 150,000 people on some form of community supervision. So those numbers are high. So being that we can take some of those minimum classification folks on supervision and put them in that category. Now, it's not a permanent category. If they violate, they do non-compliance issues, they're pulled out of it. So it's not a permanent thing that's staying. You still got to do what you're supposed to do to be able to stay in that. So, but it does incentivize the folks on our supervision, to stay, to do the right thing, to stay, be law abiding. Essentially, I always used to tell them when I was an officer, look, I'm not asking you to do anything that I'm not required to do. I got to come to work. I got to be law abiding. If I break the rules, there's consequences. So I think it's, like I said, it's a win-win for both.
Thank you, Tammy. This next question, I think, is for Tony. Well, I just want to recognize that I'm looking through our list of attendees, and it's just amazing to see we have supervision supervisors, we have probation officers, we have partners from the left and the right who joined us in helping to pass SB 752, and we have reformers from across the state and maybe a couple who aren't even in Florida listening in. So Tony, the question is, what would you say to people on probation? What would you say to probation officers to motivate them to get them inspired about moving forward with these new provisions?
Well, I most definitely would say keep on meeting each other halfway. For the people on probation, you know what I'm saying? Like, use these incentives to your advantage. Get out there and work, man. Show your good work ethic, and these jobs, they're going to hire you. Since I've been out, I've had 2 full-time jobs with full benefits. And, your background is your background, but man, listen, man, everybody just keep meeting each other halfway. And I guarantee you, man, this is going to be one of the most beautiful things that Florida has done when it comes to the probationary aspect.
Thank you, Tony. I think this is our last question, but please, folks, chime in if you have others. For Senator Pizzo, burning question on everybody's mind, especially the advocates. What's next? What are your priorities? What are the other priorities in the legislature as it relates to public safety and criminal justice reform?
So good question. I would like to do away with 67 dilapidated, completely inefficient, poorly located institutional facilities. I visit prisons a lot, and I'll go to places that have 1,300 inmates, and they have a very hard time of keeping one part-time school teacher. So I think in the immediate, I'd like to see this session, and I think the Republicans will be on board. I'd like to do a Florida virtual school for all facilities. Literally, sometimes it's 2 hours outside of, and there's price gouging going on. I'll give it, for instance, I think it's Charlotte or Hardy. One of the facilities only has like one motel nearby, right? And it's, your gut will tell you, you don't need the empirical data, but interaction with family, especially children, incentivizes people not to get DRs and to stay connected and feel like they have a purpose, whatever. There's like one Holiday Inn that charges twice what the new AC Marriott charges in Tallahassee per night during session. You know what I mean? So it becomes cost prohibitive on visitation, and they're taking advantage. And it's not about increasing beds, increasing people, whatever. I'd like to see 5 or 6 brand new, similarly situated, built near major metropolitan areas or near the universities and transportation networks, whatever, brand new facilities that have air conditioning. I mean, every day I'm behind the scenes asking where the hell these temporary units are. They're testing at Lowell, the women's facility, because I go into prisons and it's freaking 99 degrees when I'm inside the room with everybody. So where do we go? It's very simple. As a prosecutor, I would say, in the interest of justice, the safety of the community, a deterrence, closure for the victim, all that stuff, this sentence is necessary. But what most prosecutors will tell you is that prosecutors, probation, Tammy, my former self as a prosecutor, and police officers would love not to have a job. We would love to be able to have to go find something else to do, right? We don't do enough. And I bet you if I asked Tony 6 questions and walked him through what his experience was, it's a testament to his character and wanting to rehabilitate himself and grow, not the amazing education he got and vocational training he got inside. Okay? It's a testament to him. So we need to do things that are necessary. If I tell you that I can lower recidivism, improve public safety for your daughters, your sons, your community, your neighborhood, and all that stuff, by spending X number of dollars, which is de minimis compared to what the cost on society is, that's the best selling point. So that's where we're going. On average, our inmates, our incarcerated folks are maybe at a 5th grade reading level upon entry. And the other thing that people don't track, but I did anecdotally, is how many people upon arrest and conviction were actually full-time employed. It's very low. Very, very, very low. Because people that have a good job, roof over their head, things are going well, and they don't want to lose what they got, are not committing felonies and patterns of fraud. So that's sort of where we're going. So employment and education, preventative, prophylactically, of course. Also, the utility of me being here is not just to sit here and enjoy listening to all this, but 2 big bills. This is a big bill that passed for criminal justice reform. I also served Surfside, where I was almost every day watching the collapsed file of my constituents being pulled from a pile. It took that for me to get a condo bill passed. It's not perfect, and everyone's freaking out about the changes that we made, and now we're doing 2 town halls tomorrow with Senator Bradley. So this is what I would tell you. There's some things we can tweak. This is not like the last version of it. And I don't want, like, if Tony's like, damn, I just got 2 vocational certificates, I just got this, and you're telling me they're not eligible because it wasn't after July 1st. Those are some retroactivity I think we can tweak. I also think that a very fair, plain meaning interpretation of the reading of this will allow for, I don't want to call it double dipping, but certainly an acceleration of credits. I believe you should be able to get those 60 days while apprenticing or actually working, as opposed to just going to school, for a vocation, if that makes sense. So if you're apprenticing with a plumber, with an electrician, whatever, and then you become certified, I think you should be able to do that on the job. If that makes any sense. And Tony was sort of joking in the video, but if he's doing 40, 50 hours a week over 6 months, I think he should get, on a sliding scale, should get more credit. These are things we can tweak and be more particular about. And since it's coming off of unanimous support, I don't think anyone's going to object to it.
Yeah, a quick follow-up to that from Isabel in the chat. She's asking if there are any plans to do anything for misdemeanor probation. The credits don't apply to misdemeanor as we understand, correct? And so
So misdemeanor probation, remember, the court's authority is on a first degree misdemeanor is 1 year. Okay, so if you did any kind of, you got day for day credit when you were booked, and however many days you stayed in, sometimes maybe it got knocked down, whatever. But the court's full authority is really just for a year. So it could be 6 months of jail followed by 6 months of probation, but that's it. It runs out. Okay, and so I have not seen really a situation in misdemeanors unless it's an extraordinary circumstance where. But again, we're spoiled in Miami, where we've had early termination. Okay, it's always contemplated that if you did everything you were supposed to do, you can get early termination, even on some pretty serious stuff that got knocked down. I think we should do a better job of codifying that statewide. Always one little problem, one concern. Senator Brandis, Senator Perry have had all kinds of bills that you remember that seek to increase gain time, right? So right now you're at 85%, unless you like the deadly sins, the 9 enumerated things that are not eligible for it. And then, it's like, let's try 65. Well, maybe we'll settle with 75. Here's the problem. You're going to have prosecutors someplace, 97% of all cases closed by plea. Okay, they don't go to trial. I had a prolific trial schedule, 52 trials to verdict, but it was on really serious violent stuff that people didn't want to plea. Most cases plea out. You'll have some prosecutors, some state attorneys who will increase the plea offer because they realize that it's going to peel back and go to a lower, for a higher gain time. Does that make sense? Where you would normally offer someone 8 years because they're going to do 7 years and 2 months. Now, if it goes down to 75% that you have to serve, they'll increase it up to a 10-year plea because they want the net time to be served to be X, if that makes sense. So we have to protect against that.
Tammy, you have a question.
Yes, my question is directed for Senator Pizzo. You mentioned what's in the future, and you mentioned the institutions and the prisons. Quite frankly, they're always in the public talks with public safety and what needs to be fixed. I think, with probation, we're a part of that public safety. And as I mentioned, we're supervising over 150,000 folks on some form of supervision, whether it be community control, conditional release, drug offender probation, pretrial. We have veteran courts, mental health courts. And I don't think a lot of people know, but fiscally, as a fiscal responsibility, we also oversee the collection of over $9 million on an annual basis of restitution, court costs, and fines.
Yep.
And even all these little things, when you talk about the credits, and the daunting task of our officers on all the job duties that we have to do, the field, seeing the people in the office, overseeing community service and the monies and hooking people on GPS. I mean, I'd like to see a lot more of the legislators do ride-alongs and visit our offices, see more of what we do on our side, like everybody.
Absolutely.
Prison. Yeah. I got a challenge coin for you, Senator Pizzo, to
Tammy,
ride along in Miami.
Tammy, I didn't respond on Twitter when I challenged all of the legislators to go visit a prison, and you said, Senator Pizzo, you should do a ride along. I've probably spent 600 or 700 hours with probation officers in Miami-Dade County. I've taken care of a lot of birthdays, a lot of emergencies, and a lot of situations for probation officers over the years, a lot of them. And so I didn't sort of call it back out on Twitter, but the issue politically for probation officers is a political classification of probation officers, which is really my friends across the aisle. So did you guys all get bonuses as first responders or as as law enforcement during the pandemic?
We did.
Right.
The $1,000, right.
Okay. And how about if you contracted COVID while likely on the job, if that's what you're doing, were you eligible for workers' comp, or did it have to be personal sick and leave time?
I think
it was sick and leave time. It was not workers' comp. So those are the things that we work behind the scenes. So when I have the governor that says we back the blue, meanwhile, it's concurrent with conversations I'm having with his office saying, why do I have 6 motormen from Miami Beach that are on ventilators in the hospital right now on COVID? Why can't that be workers' comp? And then we changed it this session with Bill 1066 with Danny Burgess. So for me, it's more of a classification and consideration. 911 operators were not considered first responders during the pandemic, even though they never stopped working. And we had a push to have them included. County correction officers were not included. We had to, push to do that. You guys need a new fleet. Ideally for me, your ratio of supervisors to supervisees should not exceed 50. You're at 91 right now. My understanding is when it balloons up, that means one probation officer is responsible on a blended average of 90 probationers. That's out of control. But that again speaks to the woefully, objectively anemic attention that's given considering the population size, right? You would have a city that had 2,000 police officers for 180,000 people that were convicted of something, not just the general population, not 90-year-olds and not 5-year-olds. We're talking about a population that was convicted of a prior situation. You'd likely have 4,000 to 5,000. So what the problem has been is there is a lock them up and throw away the key mentality. And not to be partisan, but the Republicans have been the majority for 20 plus years in legislature, 22 years, in the cabinet. You guys have not been treated right. It's the bottom line. And it is a dollars, it is a focus. But, Maggie's my chief of staff, our former chief of staff, now the caucus chief of staff, 15-year veteran prosecutor, and she talks to probation officers every day about cases that still arise. So it's really the treatment and classification of your probation officers that's most important, because they're actually treated worse than teachers, who have 27 kids in the class. You guys have 90 people that you're overseeing. It's too high. And I would be more than amenable to codifying in a statute that critical, is at 50 and that's the ceiling and you shouldn't have any more. What does that mean? That means more staff, more resources, or more alternative situations. Most people don't realize, but we came dangerously close. I think we hit it. It just, no one actually pushed on it. We came to a situation during the pandemic where we reached such low critical staffing levels, high critical staffing levels at institutions that it required mandatory release. People don't realize that, but we hit it. And just, because of COVID and whatever, but we wouldn't get away with the numbers and the proportions that you have on a probation officer to probationer basis in any other discipline or any other agency. So it speaks to that. But for the optics of it, I'm happy to jump in the car with you and spend all night.
All right. Well, some of our caseloads, by the way, do have statutory limits, the community control, the sex offenders.
Sure. It's
regular probation caseloads that, it's like you said, can balloon up. And, when we're fully staffed, the caseloads are pretty reasonable. But, we, like I said, with everybody else struggling with staffing, most of ours, I would say almost 100% is just been the pay. Now, we just did get a pay increase, which we hope that helps stop the bleeding. But for the responsibility of the job that we have to do and everything, it's, woefully underpaid. But we do appreciate the pay raises from, this last session that all state employees got, and the retention pay for probation officers and corrections officers. It was there definitely much needed to help those
Sure.
that rate. So I thank you for that.
Thank you both for your great work. I have one last question, which is, how will we know that this is all working? And Senator Bizzo, you might have an answer. Tammy, you might have an answer. I have an answer actually too, which is that one way we'll know is that, I really encourage partners and individuals and even supervision officers on this call. We collect stories of people all across the country who are on probation. And I think the story collection process in Florida is going to be especially critical. People who are on probation are going through it, are successful or having challenges. I think we really want to encourage you. Then if you could drop the survey link in the chat, we use a survey instrument. It's a really simple form to fill out. And we encourage you to bookmark that and save it, because the direct experience people is the way that we keep a pulse on what's actually happening all across the state. But if others want to chime in as to how will we know this is working, I'm happy to hear the answers.
The easiest way to see it is that the plea offering. If I were to offer 5 followed by 5, or 6 followed by nothing, or 3 followed by 7, you're gonna see when those plea offers are taken, and you'll find out like real soon. A lot of the people that were in my court did not want to be on paper, right? And the community control success rate is so low because if Tammy and I are police officers and we're following Emily in the car, if you give us a long enough road, she's going to fail to maintain a single lane, you follow what I mean? So, and it's a lot more strict. Also, I don't smoke pot, but I don't see the nexus sometimes in drug testing for things that have no nexus to the underlying crime, if that makes sense. Someone who's on, drug offender probation, things like that. Some of the things just don't really have a nexus, at all. The other thing that we need to do a better job of is everybody's all on this driver's license kick. Let's everybody get everyone's driver's license back. But I'm also concerned about you're setting someone up for failure if Tony's driving in the car and he doesn't have insurance, right? So I think it's got to be a tri-party agreement with insurance as well, because we have 411,000 uninsured motorists in Miami-Dade County alone. And I don't want that to be the basis of somebody getting, launched. Sorry, I'm using colloquial terms that we use in court.
I think on a data level too, we'll be looking at recidivism, reconviction rates for people under probation, community control who are on the credits. We'll be looking at early termination success rates. It might be the case a probation officer sees someone, get that vocational certificate, stay employed, that they're like, wait, if we're trying to incentivize them, maybe I just get, submit that early termination petition or work with the court to see if they're eligible. And then we'll see that in the success rates, which is, can they just, complete the term successfully? I mean, I think, the department where they have, instituted, they created a sort of incentive that allowed people on community control to visit family or get for specific circumstances. And they saw that success rate for people who earn that success incentive increased dramatically from that 28% level. And so I think that community control success rate is another thing that we'll be keeping an eye on. And we're very fortunate to have, wonderful leadership in the Florida Department of Corrections who is trying to move things forwards and to promote public safety and promote second chances. And so we'll be looking at those key data points, in the next year, in the next couple of years. Really, it takes a couple of years for a bill that's passed into law to really be implemented. And so we'll be keeping an eye on that along with those stories while listening to folks on the ground who are either probation officers or people under supervision to make sure to hear what their experience has been.
Great. Katie or Emily, does somebody want to close us out? This concludes the Q&A portion of today's webinar.
Thank you, Alex. And I wanted to thank all of our panelists. This was a great first run, one of 4. We're going to be doing the other 3 regions spread out, 2 more in September, 1 more in October. So for those of you that are participating today and you or those that are in your membership or those clients that you serve are interested, please send this out. This has been recorded, so we'll send the recording as well so you can refer back to it. Feel free to join us at Reform. Text the word reform, all caps, to 81411. That's if you're not receiving our emails regularly. We'll be sending updates related to these webinars, what we're doing in Florida, also what we're doing nationally. I also want to thank everybody that helped us build and spread the word about this webinar. And as we continue, of course, the Florida Police Benevolent Association, as well as our partners in working on this bill for the past few years, which is the Americans for Prosperity in Florida, Operation New Hope, Florida Rights Restoration Coalition, Florida Cares, Florida Policy Institute, Alliance for Safety and Justice, Right on Crime, and of course, the amazing Florida Public Defenders, who I hope many are watching, and I know many will continue to watch as we continue to educate about these. So thank you so much for everyone that participated today, panelists and that's watching, and please join us for more in the future and let us know if you have any questions.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.